in adversity against American sanctions. That's what we want to tap on.
Talking of sanctions, Ambassador, we want to zero in on that now. We know that Iran is also under sanctions. Yes. Zimbabwe is under sanctions. And these countries that have been sanctioned are now forming up collaborations. They're now coming together as coalitions. What does it say about the impact of sanctions on countries that will say, regardless of sanctions, we'll work together and go forward?
Well, it just means that we are telling America that you cannot load it off forever. Against other countries, because sanctions create their own means of survival instincts. So we have now developed our own survival instincts under the Second Republic, and President Mnangagwa has really taken the country forward in terms of fighting sanctions by not being complaining indigently and lazily, but by actually being innovative and circumventing them to the point where America now is saying we can't beat them, we might as well join them. This is exactly what Iran has also done. It has shown America that you can survive the onslaught of a superpower in a world which is beginning to be multipolar. But remember, I was talking about the population dividend.
Yes.
For 5,000 years, the center of humanity has been Africa, Europe, and Asia. This is where more than 6 billion people live, 5 billion people live. India, China, and now there's all these countries, Iran, Turkey, they are coming on board. So that whole area, we are beginning to interact outside of the Atlantic seaboard powers, the naval powers of France, England, America. So this is a big opportunity with railways, with aeroplanes.
Utilizing the numbers.
Yes, we've got the numbers, the advantage of numbers. So with Iran, it's numbers, but also proximity because of the Indian Ocean. So this is a very, very wholesome relationship, which goes back to the original grain of commercial relations which made the great Zimbabwe civilization prosper for 8 centuries.
It is an indication of
Dr. Mero, I might have to stop you. They were going to really continue in terms of that narrative because we do have so many to talk about. We're going to take a short break. When you come back, we'll get to the theme of all the issues. This is the third and final segment of this week's edition of Economics 101. Now, before we went for the break, Doctor, you wanted to explain in terms of how to utilize the numbers to really our advantage.
Yeah, I was saying, following what the ambassador said,
yes.
The shift in the geopolitical economic environment has also prompted us as a nation to search for markets also. But in your search for markets, one must understand, and you are guided by, for example, our beautiful blueprint. We have got a vision 2030. If you read all the intricacies associated with those blueprints, one is looking at it and say, what are the global markets? What are the dynamics? Look at Africa as what is happening now. If you look at the debate that has been going on in terms of free trade, if you look at the African free trade, continental free trade area, which is wanting to bring in, break barriers, strengthen the ability of the continent to search for global markets, you can only do that through relationship with other countries. Now, when you look at what probably President Rais is bringing in the desired markets, the desired technology, and in terms of our thrust, I think the thrust generally of the Second Republic has been to tap on our resources, value add them, beneficiate them, send them outside to earn foreign currency. That is a search for markets. So when you look at globalization, which is a reality, it talks about those markets and opportunities. And we want to say, okay, here is Iran, who is agreed to tap into Latin America, agreed to tap into Africa, and agreed to tap into Zimbabwe. Surely it's a worthwhile opportunity.
Ambassador, earlier on we referred to the historical background in terms of the relations between Zimbabwe and Iran. And you know that within spaces like the media, and talking of ZBC, has also benefited from some of the equipment coming through from Iran. Can you just explain in terms of how do we continue on that same line, receiving equipment, technology, so that the country will continue to develop economically?
Well, Iran has been a strategic friend, like I told you, before independence. You may want to know that our present president was actually in Iran in 1979.
Before independence?
Before independence, he went to Iran, when we were not even a country. So they value this relationship between President Emerson Mnangagwa and the Iranian leadership. It goes back to many years. And he's building upon that. Recently, the First Lady spent a lot of time, striking very sound relationships between, the women's wing of our party, but also the women in general, on a number of projects which could be pursued jointly, between the two countries. But there's also, to add synergies, to add flavor to what has been talking about using Iran as a market to the Middle East and elsewhere. There's also the other side, which is Iran using Zimbabwe as a launch pad for the Africa Free Trade Area. Remember, it's a major industrial power in its own right, which has survived the toughest of American sanctions, and it has used its historical experience to trade with Europe to become a major industrial power. It has products, world-class products, which are in search of a market and are affordable. So Iran, in these agreements, is looking at Zimbabwe's very well-developed human resource base as a launch pad for its products into Africa. They want Zimbabwe to become a hub of powerful industrial companies from Iran, so that they produce in Zimbabwe, in special economic zones within Zimbabwe, and penetrate the 1.3 billion African market, which is now at 3 to 4 trillion, and growing because of the young population in Africa. So we have a huge opportunity of harnessing our security, our political, our diplomatic, our historical friendship in Iran through these joint commissions which we are having, so that we sell Iranian products, we become a bridge of Iranian products into Africa at a time when Iran is breaking out. It is breaking out, become a major industrial power. They are not the only ones. Turkey is doing the same thing. Iran is doing the same thing. Indonesia is doing the same thing. So we've got this wholesome, virtuous arrival of new economic powers. All of them, they are looking at Zimbabwe because we've carved our identity as a strong, powerful, independent African state, and much more business attuned under President Mnangagwa.
But what then becomes important, let me just add on to what Ambassador is saying. That is all good, well and fine. What then becomes important is the transfer of technology and skills to enable us to be self-sufficient in the long run. I hate the economic dependency syndrome, which must not be perpetuated. That eventually has to come to a stop. So what you need now, you need that push effect in terms of the economic dynamics to tell us now this is where we desired to be. And we need the investment vehicles. Yes, as he has said, we are very well endowed with human capacities. Our human capital base is very good in Zimbabwe. But what you need now is to adapt and adopt certain technologies that are user-friendly to ourselves, to our policies, our climatic conditions, that are understood by our people, by our farmers, by our industrialists, so that there is an element of what I might call indigenous understanding in terms of the technology that we'll get. So I don't think those who fear that total translation of expertise is tantamount to sort of economic colonization. That is investment.
Quite interesting discussions when we time has got a way of actually limiting us to the discussions. Ambassador, in 60 seconds, what are your last words to our Zimbabweans who are watching you today?
I'm very happy that President Rice is here. I'm very happy that we are renewing our friendship with Iran, and President Mnangagwa, who is an old friend of Iran from pre-independence days, is now in charge and has got pro-business policies. We want to make sure that Iranian capital, Iranian technology, and Iranian know-how in management expertise makes Zimbabwe its home and uses Zimbabwe as a launch pad for it to penetrate Africa. And vice versa, we want Zimbabwean products made in Zimbabwe, world-class products, to find new markets, particularly in the Middle East, which has always been the center of humanity, for more than 5,000 years. We want to work with Iran for the penetration of the huge Eurasian market from Europe to Asia to Africa, where most of humanity is. And Iran is snug at the center of the world in terms of the population dynamics. So Iran could become a major entrepôt, a port where we distribute our goods and services, to the various markets of the former Soviet bloc countries. Iran is a good entry point. And remember also, Iran has got very good technology, in many fields, because of course, we've got to take it. Remember, when we talk about Mesopotamia, long way back, 4,000 years ago. We are talking of Iran. We are talking of Persia. Remember the Persian Wars. These are people who have always been creative and innovative, and they've had a continuous civilization literally for more than 4,000 years. So it's an organic country, but it's our neighbor. Through the Indian Ocean, people tend to think of trade with Zimbabwe and Europe, but we've got to go round South Africa throughout the Atlantic. Our natural neighborhood is the literal Indian Ocean, of which Iran is part of that. So historically, we have been together with Iran in Africa, even during our great civilizations. Kilwa on the Rovuma River in Tanzania was a trading relationship with Zimbabwe well before the Portuguese came. So we are establishing historical relationships in which were renewed, of course, by the Iranian Revolution. So in agriculture, they're a big market. They are also a big access market to other areas. And they also can bring equipment. Remember, we had Messi Ferguson tractors from Iran being assembled.
Quite popular in Zimbabwe.
Yes, they were very popular, but it was not from America, it was from Iran. We could have a production line now. We need 40,000 tractors. Iran could be a substantial supplier because they're a major producer of equipment. But even at the forefront of technology, look at what they've done with the drones. America, Russia is using Iranian drones, which even Russia is to admit they reverse engineer the American technology. They are at the forefront of software engineering, Iranians. So for Education 5.0, the jump from education to skills, which requires the investment, which requires transfer of knowledge. Iran is already the production lines. You don't have to invent the wheel. You can be educated. You can do a lot of research, but you cannot it's not easy to apply that knowledge because you need capital. And Iran is a major producer of oil. It has a lot of capital in its own right. It is one of the main suppliers of energy to the world. So capital is not an issue for Iran per se. But they also have this experience of surviving on their own.
Dr. Malero, your last words to our listeners.
We are finally, and I'm happy we are getting right in terms of the economic fundamentals, in terms of the external liaison that we need to have, in terms of soliciting for foreign direct investment, in terms of technology transfer. We are beginning to find, and I think the Second Republic is finding the correct formula. We can do it. Yes. Zimbabweans, we will succeed.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Mtrango, for coming through to the studio. Really help us unpack these issues, as well as Dr. Murerwa for coming through with an economic mindset to really help us understand how Zimbabwe can move forward from here. That's all we had for you on today's episode of Economics 101. My name is Ian Wambe.